What up, gang? Let me stop that music for us. How's it going? My name is Amy. If you haven't been here in a bit, my name is Amy, Abomb, hey you, whatever you want to call me. That's what we're doing. And today's broadcast, I know it's April Fool's and everybody's joking around and all this other stuff, you know. I really don't have an April Fool's joke for you. I got nothing. So you can pretty much, chill in peace here, because we're not going to be, fooling you with all kinds of ridiculousness. Okay. I promise. So you're good to go here. Okay. It's all good. Second of all, let's see here. What are we going to do on the show today? Besides, April Fool shenanigans, which I'm sure everybody has been tripping you up all day. You're probably at work and your boss was like, oh, I'm going to give you a raise. April Fools. So I'm not going to do that to you. We're just going to move on, right? So today we are going to read about, I got this book. It's called The Curious History of Sex, and it's by Kate Lister. I have been going through this book. As you can see, it is pretty big. I've been going through this book. It's really interesting, very well researched. It's amazing. And I was looking online today, and sometimes, especially today, because it is April Fool's, you see some stories and you're like, is that legit or is that an April Fool's joke? Well, I saw a story about, it was a news story about I call them forced birth terrorists, basically pro-choice protester, decided to storm a health clinic, a medical facility in Washington, D.C. with her buddies. Obviously, that's illegal. You can't do that. And they got arrested and they were investigated and all this other stuff. Well, okay, fine, whatever. So here's the crazy part. They decided, I guess authorities got tipped off by someone that one of the ringleaders of this terrorist group had biohazard. It's horrible. Had biohazard situation in their home. And police were tipped off about this, and they pulled out, I don't remember how many, but a few fetuses from the home. Yeah. So I think it's about time, and I swear that is not a horrible April Fool's joke. Not at all. This is an actual, real news story that is happening. So I figured, you know what? I think everybody kind of shies away, especially when they're talking about abortion. It's a medical procedure. People need it. I don't understand why idiots are making laws against it. It doesn't make any sense. So I think it's really hard when you're looking at what's happening now and, you know, all the reaction and stuff like that. It's hard to understand what abortion is and like its history, because nobody really wants to look into it. Because yeah, sure, it's not a fun time. That's for sure. Of course not. But I think it's important to kind of like look back to where we came. And so this book, The Curious History of Sex, has a chapter called Bringing Down the Flowers, Abortion in 18th Century Britain. This person, Kate Lister, writes very, very well, and she boils it down very, very nicely. So we are definitely, I'm just going to read this to you. If you want to hang out and listen, great. I will show, there are pictures. Don't worry. It's not anything horrible. Of course I'm going to show pictures. Of course I am. I'm a good reader, of course. And at the end of the episode, you will get your weekend prediction with Cards Against Humanity. So we got a chock full episode, so we might as well get started, right? Yeah. So I'm going to start reading. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And again, I want to, before I start reading A Curious History of Sex by Kate Lister, the chapter on abortion history, I just want to preface this by saying I have not read the chapter yet. This is the first time we're both experiencing it together. Also, I just want to go ahead and just give you a trigger warning. This is a historical book. It goes into great detail. So if this is something that may cause you emotional harm, it is okay. I will see you next week. You know, it is totally fine. But I figured if you wanted to learn and you're here and we could both experience this together. Okay? So here we go. All right. So let me get this out of here. I'm going to move my mouse. All right. So this is, again, Curious History of Sex, the chapter on Bringing Down the Flowers, Abortion in 18th Century Britain. William Buchanan's Domestic Medicine in 1769 was a medical blockbuster. It sold over 80,000 copies, was translated into several European languages, and was republished to receptive audiences well into the 19th century. Buchanan claimed he wrote the work with an earnest desire to, quote, assist the well-meant endeavors in relieving distress, to eradicate dangerous and hurtful projections, to guard the ignorant and credulous against the frauds and impositions of quacks and impostors, end quote. Domestic medicine covers every subject from nosebleeds and ulcers to croup and water in the head. In his chapters on pregnancy, Buchanan outlines the causes and dangers of miscarriage and morally condemns those women who sought to deliberately terminate their pregnancy. Now, there's a side note here. It reads, in the 18th century, abortion was used interchangeably with miscarriage and did not necessarily mean the deliberate termination of a pregnancy. So we're moving on. And this is from the book. Every mother who procures an abortion does it at the hazard of her life. Yet there are not a few who run the risk merely to prevent the trouble of bearing and bringing up children. It is surely a most unnatural crime and cannot, even in the most abandoned, be viewed without horror. But in the decent matron, it is still more unpardonable. Those wretches who daily advertise their assistance to women in this business deserve, in my opinion, the most severe of all human punishments. Okay, so that was from his book. Continuing on. Abortion was made illegal in Britain in 1803 when the passing of Lord Ellenborough's Act made abortion after, quote, the quickening, unquote, first movement of the fetus, punishable by death or transportation. transportation, I should say. So abortion before the quickening was not regarded as a criminal act, as most theologians and physicians agreed. This stage was when ensoulment of the child occurred. Until then, the woman was not regarded as carrying a child, but abortion post-quickening was regarded as deeply immoral. Dr. John Astruck called the quote, miserable women, unquote, seeking an abortion, a, quote, utter shame to human nature and religion, unquote. Barrister Martin Madden called the women who died through botched abortions, quote, dutifully guilty of suicide and child murder, unquote. And a spouse procuring pills to induce an abortion is cited as suitable grounds for divorce in a number of 18th century divorce trials. As the previous chapter has shown, by the 18th century, rudimentary contraceptives were widely available. Or were available, I should say, ranging from folklore and quackery to methods that would have offered limited protection. The withdrawal method is a time-honored, if completely unreliable option. Animal gut condoms, which were rinsed out and reused, had been available from the 16th century. In his memoirs, Casanova records using a linen condom and a lemon slice as a cervical cap. Postcoital vaginal douching has been used as a method to wash away semen in the hopes of preventing pregnancy during ancient times. Owing to widespread disease, malnutrition, and poor health, fertility rates would have been reduced, but unwanted pregnancies were still widespread. When a girl found herself with a, quote, belly full, unquote, 1785, pressures of shame, circumstance, poverty, and myriad of other reasons could lead her to seek a termination. Now, I want to stop down because there is a photo here. This is a late 19th century Japanese Yoko woodblock print showing an admonition against abortion. So this is like, you know, don't do it or whatever, like those horrible pictures you see from those terrorists that sit outside health clinics and yell at women. So I'm going to continue on. In 18th century Britain, it may not have been illegal, but abortion, post-quickening, was certainly considered a deeply shameful act, and the practice is shrouded in obscurity. Owing to the paucity of primary evidence, researching the history of abortion is notoriously difficult. Court records tell the stories of women who died through botched abortions and those who faced prosecution for attempting to induce one. Physicians and midwives were unwilling to risk their own necks by providing readers with instructions on how to perform an abortion or what herbs and tonics should be taken to induce one. Rather, language is employed in such texts to allude to a plant's abortive properties. Okay, so I'm going to stop down here because there's an advertisement by Dr. L. Monroe in the Boston Daily Times newspaper for what's called, quote unquote, French periodical pills for regulation of the monthly turns of females in 1845. As advertisement advises that ladies married should not take them if they have reason to believe they are in sight, as they are sure to produce a miscarriage. Okay, I think that's some different language that we're not quite used to, but there's an ad. French pills. We're going to continue on. A text may list plants that will induce miscarriage and embedding them within the warning, quote, not to be taken by pregnant women, unquote, just as, quote, legal highs, unquote, advertise themselves as, quote, research chemicals, unquote, and not for human conception, unquote, to get around the law. Advertisements for women's monthly pills and cures for menstrual blockage can be read as coded contraceptives and I always get this word, abortifacients. Yes. That's a hard word. Okay. In English Sexualities in 1990, Tim Hitchcock argued that, quote, throughout the early morning period, recipes for medicines to bring down the flowers or to regulate menstruation were a common component of any herbal or recipe book and could certainly be obtained from the local apothecary. Ooh, lots of words that are hard. We got this. You continue on. Women seeking a bring down the flowers, unquote, that's from 1598, would naturally progress from the least to the most dangerous methods of abortion. Certain known herbs were ingested, the most commonly known being savian, pennyroyal, rue, and ergot. Savin, a species of juniper used to flavor gin, mother's ruin, is referred in numerous court records regarding abortion once the practice was made illegal in 1803. In 1829, for example, Martha Barrett was accused of taking a, quote, quantity of savian for the purpose of causing abortion, unquote. In 1834, Williams Childs was charged with illegal abortion, having given Mary Jane Wolfe a, quote, large quantity of a certain drug called savian with intent thereby to cause and procure her miscarriage, unquote. In 1855, William Longman was charged with, quote, feloniously administering to Elizabeth Eldred Atkins 10 grains of a noxious thing called savin with intent to procure miscarriage, unquote. The list goes on, and abortifacients such as savian and pennyroyal are indeed toxic. So let's look at this. Here we go. Here it is. There's the plant. All right, we're going to continue on. And, oh, did I miss something? Indeed toxic, and consumed in high enough quantity could induce miscarriage. At too high a dose, they could and did kill the mother too. If these methods proved ineffective, as would usually be the cause, the mother was left with increasingly desperate and dangerous methods of abortion. Sitting in scalding hot baths, drinking vast quantities of gin, falling downstairs, or being forcefully struck in the stomach have all been recorded as efforts to induce an abortion. But if all these failed, surgical intervention could be sought. Accounts of surgical abortion are extraordinarily rare in the 18th century. One of the few detailed accounts of 18th century surgical abortion is the record of the trial of Eleanor Bear of Derby in 1732. Eleanor was indicted on 3 counts. One account of encouraging a man to murder his wife, and 2 accounts of, quote, destroying the fetus in the womb, unquote, and by, quote, putting an iron instrument into the body. One of the women Bear operated on was, quote, unknown to the jury, unquote, and the other is named Grace Belfort. Grace Belfort worked briefly for Eleanor, during which time she was raped by a visitor to the house. Grace confessed to Eleanor that she feared she was with child, and for 30 shillings, paid by the rapist, Eleanor said she could, quote, clear her of the child. The account given of what happened next is so rare, it's worth sharing in full. All right, here we go. So, evidence. Some company gave me cider and brandy. My mistress and I were both full of liquor, and when the company was gone, we could scarce get upstairs, but we did get up. Then I laid me on the bed, and my mistress brought a kind of instrument. I took it to be like an iron skewer, and she put it up into my body in a great way, and it hurt me. Court. What followed upon that? Evidence. Some blood came from me. Court. Did you miscarry after that? Evidence. The next day, I had a miscarriage. Court. What did the prisoner do after this? Evidence. She told me the job was done. Eleanor was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment and to stand in the pillory for the next 2 market days. Now, I'm going to stop right there. This is around the time that the pillory would mean like a town square, and they would basically like lock you up, and the crowd would come and throw shit at you, like actual shit too. So it was not a fun time. So it goes on to say, the mob was so incensed by Eleanor's crimes that she barely escaped being pillared with her life. So that means they really rode down upon it. And it says records describe townfolk hurling eggs, turnips, and rocks at her head until she was bleeding heavily and barely conscious. After trying to wriggle free, she was dragged back to the jail only to repeat the ordeal the following market day. In 1760, poet Thomas Brown wrote, Satire upon a Quack. where he attacks an abortionist who murdered his friend's child. The poem is a bitter and sustained attack upon the, quote, graveyard pimp, who unborn infants murdered in the womb. Brown curses the abortionists to hear the, quote, screams of infants and their dying mothers for all eternity to be the jest of midwives and strumpets without noses, and to be stalked by the most solemn horrors of the night. Brown refers to the abortionist tools throughout the poem. He does not mention an iron skewer, but he does allude to a baleful potions, stabbing verse, pointed darts, and a murdering quill. Any thin, sharpened tool, even the sharpened point of a quill pen, could serve as a suitable instrument to pierce the cervix and bring down the flowers. This procedure would be self-induced, or well-meaning friends or family members would attempt to penetrate the womb. How many women suffered irreparable damage, mutilation, infection, and death as a result of this practice is unknown, but many were willing to risk those dangers. If this method failed, or the poor girl simply could not afford the abortionist's fee, there would be 3 options left. Ooh, here we go. Keep and raise the child, abandon the child, or murder the child and hide the body. Let's keep going. I know this is some rough shit, but this is real. This is real world. This is real, okay? And I'm going to tell you right now, you outlaw abortion, it doesn't go away. This stuff happens. So I'm going to continue. In Francis Gross's Lexicon Ballatricanonium, a dictionary of buckish slang, university wit, and pickpocket eloquence in 1785, there is a truly disturbing entry. Quote, to stifle a squeaker, to murder a bastard, or throw it into the necessary house privy. This phrase also appears over 100 years earlier in a new dictionary of the terms Ancient and Modern of the Canting Crew, 1698, and in various collections of slang through the 19th century. That infanticide had its own slang suggests that the practice was alarmingly common. Christian Russell of the parish of St. Paul's Covent Garden was found guilty of murdering her illegitimate child in 1702 by throwing the same into a house of office. In 1703, Mary Tudor was put on trial for murdering her female bastard child on the 18th of January last by throwing the same into a house of office, whereby it was choked and strangled. In 1708, Anne Gardner was found guilty of murdering her female bastard by throwing of it into a house of office, where 'twas suffocated with filth. Anne Wheeler was indicted for suffocating her male bastard by suffocating it in a house of easement in 1711. Elizabeth Arthur drowned her male bastard in a house of office in 1777, and Elizabeth Harold was found guilty of drowning her male bastard in 1738. She was one of 4 women to be hanged for murdering her illegitimate children that year. The list goes on and on. In the court records for the Old Bailey alone between 1700 and 1800, there are no less than 134 trials for infanticide, the overwhelming majority of which are the killings of illegitimate children. We must remember that this is only one court in one area, and these trials are only for those who were caught. The actual figures of illegitimate infanticide will never be known, but most of the women on trial were poor, unwed, unsupported, and alone. They were desperate. A woman who had sex or fell pregnant outside of wedlock was said to be, quote, ruined or have, quote, fallen, both of which convey the consequences of marriage or sex before marriage. If she were wealthy enough, a pregnant woman could avoid scandal by hiding away for the duration of her pregnancy and then placing the baby in the care of relatives or someone who had been paid off. But for those who could not afford it to pay for a cover-up, the consequences were bleak indeed. The social stigma was so great that an expectant mother could be turned out of her family home, lose her employment, and would be left to fend for herself in a very hostile world. 18th century bawdy literature, such as Fanny Hill, loves to tell the story of a virgin who was, quote, debauched and abandoned, who must turn to the sex trade to survive. The sad truth is that once a girl has been, quote, ruined and fallen from polite society, there would have been precious few options available to her. Sex workers would have been familiar with methods of contraception and ways to induce abortion, but brothel babies were inevitable. In 1993, a 19th century New York tenement house in Five Points district was excavated, and the skeletons of 2 full-term infants, most likely twins, were discovered in the lower soil level of the privy. Evidence from the time suggests that the particular address, 12 Orange Street, was once a brothel. Although fetal remains have been excavated from privies before, this discovery is significant as it is the only one with the strong contextual links to the sex trade. Now, I'm going to show you something. Trigger warning. This is a instrument, a hooked instrument once used for removing an aborted fetus. There it is. There it is. So I show you things when they come up. And here's a footnote to contextual links to the sex trade. In 1973, the remains of a newborn baby were found in an 18th century privy site in Philadelphia. Fetal remains were also found in a site in Minneapolis that used to be a restaurant in 1870. And Thomas A. Christ, Babies in the Privy, Prostitution, Infanticide, and Abortion in New York City's Five Points District, Historical Archaeology is where that information was found. I'm going to keep going. I know this is really brutal, but this is information that needs to be known because you outlaw abortion and people find a way. In order to escape the noose, the mother's life depended on being able to prove that the child was stillborn. In 1624, Parliament passed an act that made it a capital offense for unmarried mothers to conceal the death of an illegitimate child, the presumption being that if the child died, the mother had killed it. In order to prove that the birth was not concealed, the mother had to produce at least one witness statement that the baby was stillborn. The prosecution would also have to prove that the pregnancy and birth had been deliberately concealed. And Gardner, mentioned above, was proven to have murdered her baby as she had made no provisions for the baby and told no one she was pregnant. This continues. I think this is in court documents here. The prisoner could say little of her defense. It did not appear that she made any provisions of the birth of the child, nor was she heard to cry out, or she used any endeavor to discover it, as the statute of King James I, the 1924 Act, in such cases requires. The fact being clear upon the whole, the jury found her guilty of the indictment. Continues. This was enough to condemn Anne to death. She was executed on the 15th of January, 1708. Now, I'm going to pause here, and I just want to kind of like catch you up with America. This is all over in Europe and Britain. This is what this is. I have yet to find a good like sex book about the United States, so maybe I got to write it. Maybe. But I just want to kind of point to this, that back in the day, and honestly, yes, it's a long time ago is what I'm talking about, but think about this. There were no options for these women, and they had to take it into their own hands, and that's horrible, first of all. And second of all, I want to bring light to this because, again, all these states trying to ban abortion, the Supreme Court dragging their feet on things, President Biden refusing to, just codify it into law and being done with it. Refusing to do all these things will result in states outlawing abortion, and it will also result in women dying from taking things into their own hands. So let's be real. So let's continue, shall we? The philanthropist Thomas Coram opened the London Foundling, that's kind of a weird name for a hospital, right? Okay, Foundling Hospital in 1739. His primary aim was to give shelter to the children of the unhappy female who fell victim to the seductions and false promises of the designing man and had been left to irretrievable disgrace. When it first opened, the hospital expected to receive 20 infants, but was overwhelmed with demand. Eventually, the hospital had to limit admissions to infants under 2 months, and admittance was done through a ballot system. So that mothers could reclaim their child from the hospital, they were initially encouraged to leave a token with their baby so they could be recognized later. Thousands of ribbons, thimbles, broken coins, lockets, bits of buttons, pieces of paper, and shells left with abandoned children are still housed at the Foundling Hospital Museum today. Of the 16,282 babies brought to the hospital between 1741 and 1760, only 152 were reclaimed. And I want to stop there right there. That's another thing. Again, you ban abortions, guess what? If the homemade abortions don't work, if the back alley abortions don't work, and they end up having the child, you are going to see more and more infants being left on hospital steps, on church steps, on you name it. This will happen. It did. Okay? So we're going to continue on. In 1967, when the UK Abortion Act was passed, midwife Jennifer Worth was asked to comment on the morality of abortions. After 14 years of witnessing the reality of illegal abortion, she replied she, quote, did not regard it as a moral issue, but a medical issue. A minority of women will always want an abortion. Therefore, it must be done properly. Today, most of us would like to think that we are privileged enough to never find ourselves in the situation that women like Anne Gardner found themselves in over 300 years ago, destitute, ill, alone, stigmatized, and pregnant with no maternity rights, medical care, security, or means to raise a child. But the right to safely access abortion is severely under threat. Yes. As I write this, and I believe this was written in 2020, I think. So as I continue, as I write this, the states of Alabama and Georgia are passing two of the most aggressive anti-abortion bills in recent American history. The bills will outlaw abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected. What was once known as the, quote, the quickening, and until 2019, Northern Ireland had some of the most restrictive laws around abortion in the world, with women facing long jail sentences if they go through with one. While we have come a long way in terms of social security, medical care, and attitudes to sex in general, the debate surrounding abortion is still rooted in religious normalizing that seeks to demonize and punish both the women who seek abortions and the doctors who perform them. But as the history of contraceptives shows, abortions will always be sought, risks will always be taken, and no amount of criminalization, not even the death penalty itself, will change that. And that's damn true. And I want to end this with showing you, this is a picture of selection of tokens mothers left with their infants at the London Foundling Hospital. The tokens were to help mothers identify their children if they could come back for them. The thousands still housed at the Foundling Hospital today are testament to the fact that most never came back. And another metal token left with an abandoned infant at the London Foundling Hospital by a mother in the 18th century. So here you go. There's some tokens that I'm sure they would like either tie to the infant's wrist or something like that with some string. So yeah, thank you. And that's the end of that chapter. I'll stop right there. This is a wonderful book. Wonderful book. I suggest if you are any way curious about the history of sex, definitely pick this book up by Kate Lister. It is great. It is written very, very well. Again, researched amazingly. Absolutely wonderful book. So thank you again for hanging out with me while we read a little bit of that. And I hope you learned some stuff. I know that's not the greatest of subjects to talk about, but I feel that there needs to be a rational discussion about abortion. No more of this like dreamland type of thinking, okay? People are going to get abortions. It's going to happen, whether you like it or not. People are going to get abortions. Now, the question is, are we the kind of society who's just going to allow people to die? Or are we going to provide a safe medical procedure? I say provide a safe medical procedure, but there are a lot of people who are like, no, let's ban them. Well, here's the deal. Again, like I said, we learned from A Curious History of Sex that people will do it. And they will die. And they will abandon kids at a hospital. And they will throw them in pit toilets to drown them. And they will do it. They will. So what are we going to do about that? I say medical procedures, man. Abortion is a medical procedure, dude. Come on. Get with it. If you don't want abortion, don't have one. Cool? Cool. All right. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Well, actually, Kate Lister, but also my opinion, I would have to say. So again, let's do something a little bit more fun, yeah? I think so. That was pretty heavy, but I appreciate you coming here and learning. I do. I really do. And again, get this book. Get this book, man. Get this book. Now, are you ready for your weekend prediction with Cards Against Humanity? I know you are. I know you are. So let's do it, okay? So I pulled the cards. Here we go. Your first thing that's going to be in your weekend, according to Cards Against Humanity, would be Axe body spray. Ugh, man, that gives me flashbacks of high school that I would rather not have. Thank you so much. And the next thing that's going to be in your weekend, according to Cards Against Humanity, the blood of Christ, otherwise known as wine, right? So you're going to have wine in your weekend? Great, if that's what you want, right? And the last thing that's going to be in your weekend, according to Cards Against Humanity, that would be wifely duties. Oh, yeah. You know, in my instance, they really should spell it duties as in D-O-O-T-I-S. Just saying. I don't want it to be false advertising because I'm going to be taking dumps with this dumper. That's right. Anyway, that's your weekend. According to Cards Against Humanity. And again, thanks for hanging out with me. We do this every Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. That's live. And when, the next day I upload it to YouTube, the whole episode, and you'll find all kinds of fun clips and stuff on my social medias, which is down here. So thanks for hanging out with me. And you know what? Be excellent to each other, okay? Do it. It sounded threatening. But seriously, be excellent to each other. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.